Welcome back to Jenny's World, keeping it fresh, keeping it real and definitely keeping it middle aged. Now don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and also subscribe to my YouTube channel, Jenny's World, and if you have time, take a look at my website, some really good stuff there. All the details as always is down below. Now today I'm going to talk about lockdown. Yes, it's that one topic we all have to talk about because there's nothing else going on. Now, lockdown I think has changed, revolutionised how we interact with each other. And I think there's going to be so many repercussions of lockdown when we eventually get out of it. I think for me, the key thing that I'm definitely missing is being able to freely leave the house and go outside. Without having to think, oh, how long do I have to go out? Without having to do that whole social distancing, cross the road when someone else is coming to you. One thing I've noticed, you go in the supermarket and you have that 2-metre marker in there, whether you're queuing inside or around the store. And I'm being very mindful to follow that and give people space in front and behind me, or mainly in front. And then you get the 1 or 2 people who just come right up to you, who just stroll past, who have no regard for that 2-foot distance. And it's just mind-boggling. And it happens so often. Now, yesterday, I went out for the first time this week to just do the weekly shop. And I was absolutely, yesterday was a lovely day. The sun was shining, it was like 10 o'clock, the sun was shining. It was great. I've never seen so many people out since we've entered lockdown. It was like a crazy normal Sunday day. There was just like loads of people. I was quite surprised by that. But there was definitely a lot more of the older generation out on the streets going for their walk, whether it be shopping or just general exercise. But the streets were a lot fuller, which I was really surprised. And as I was walking up to the shops, even the amount of cars that were on the road, it was like, 10 times the amount of cars that had been out in the previous week. And I don't know if that was because it was such a lovely day that people were just thinking, I'm going to go out and get my exercise now while I can and while it's warm. Or if they're thinking it's this hot, let's go and do a barbecue. But it made going to the shops even more interesting because there were so many people out in the streets. And people queuing just going to the bank. There was so much, it's made it so much harder to navigate and keep that 2-foot distance. And I'm not talking hundreds of people, I'm probably talking like 30, 40, maybe 50 throughout the whole, on the streets, and obviously people queuing to go in the shops. But that was more people than I was used to. And it got me thinking, and it links into what I started with, is when we come out of lockdown, we're not going to be able to go back to life as it was before. There's no vaccine at the moment. I know they're testing a vaccine, but they've been saying that if we're lucky, it may be a year before there is a vaccine that can be used. And the ministers have been saying that when lockdown is over, that we will continue on with some kind of social distancing. And this has been mentioned in Scotland, also in Wales. And we won't be going back to life as normal. EasyJet have said they're going to keep that middle seat empty to help with the social distancing. So my experience yesterday of a busy street, not as busy as it used to be, but busier than it has been since lockdown, and trying to just navigate around people on the streets. How are we going to be able to replicate that when lockdown has ended? How do we really monitor and follow those restrictions? Because the minute that, in my head, I feel the minute that it's announced that lockdown is over and you can carry on as normal, but with some kind of restrictions, people are going to be going crazy. They're all going to be out there visiting friends and families. If you think about it, 4 weeks in lockdown, that's a month where a lot of people haven't seen their friends or family, and it could be longer for some who took the decision to start working from home earlier. As I mentioned in other videos, I've been working from home now for 6 weeks. We started working from home 2 weeks earlier. And during that time, I think I probably went out a couple of times a week. So there are probably a lot of people who may have entered that kind of work from home pattern a lot earlier than lockdown started, and who perhaps didn't anticipate the speed of a lockdown happening, and who haven't seen the mum, the dad, the brother, the sister, the nieces and nephews, the grandparents, whoever. So there's going to be this desire to really go out and spend time with them, to do that thing, that touching, that hugging, giving them a kiss, all of that stuff that we've been unable to do. So how is that really going to be managed? Because ultimately, if lockdown's lifted, the coronavirus is still out there. You're still able to get it. So how do you compensate? So when you're seeing your elderly parents, and is it you going straight up there with the kids, giving them hugs and kisses? And again, there's got to be that kind of thought going into that. So, well, actually, just because lockdown is over, it doesn't mean life is back to normal, because life certainly won't be back to normal. So how do you manage that? How do you manage the grandkids to go and visit and then just see, well, okay, you can see granddad but stay 10 foot away or 2 foot, whatever that is. The natural reaction for kids definitely is to go and run up to them, hug them, touch them and all of that. But it's like you can't do that. So I am struggling with what this is going to look like when we get out of lockdown. Even from a point of view from travelling to work, I mean, for me, I have to get a bus to the train station, and that bus is always packed. Even before I get there, the bus is literally packed, and you're literally shoulder to shoulder with somebody. There's no space to sit, it's standing room only if you're lucky. So that's one issue. You then go to the train station, and the trains are always packed, guaranteed, every time, from East Croydon up to London Bridge. As soon as you get on the train, it's normally, if you're lucky, you're like this, sardines, nose to nose, shoulder to shoulder, bum to bum, as you're trying to get onto that train. And so if you can imagine, I think in one carriage you can probably have about 100 people squashed in there. So again, what does that look like? I mean, people still have to get to work, so social distancing, what they're going to do, have, 2 foot markers in there, because that's never going to work. So that's another challenge. And then you get to London Bridge, and then you carry on with your destination. So I normally walk to where I work, and that's probably about a 20-25 minute walk. Starting across London Bridge. London Bridge is always packed and heaving, so again, you're never going to have that 2 foot distance. And then you get into the office. I think from an office perspective, it's probably easier to kind of like manage that 2 foot social distance in. But again, you're going to the cafe, we're going to the bathroom, what you're going to be taking tickets, taking it in turns. So that's just my thinking of how you're going to do that. But it's going back into, if you're at work and you go and get your lunch in your M&S or Tesco's or Sainsbury's or whatever, everybody tends to go to lunch between 12 and 2. Again, crowds. How are you going to do that? Social distancing. So there's just so many connotations just from a work perspective. But then let's kind of wrap it back up. Let's go back to school. School's reopened. There's no way my 6-year-old grandkid is gonna be keeping 2 foot apart. She's gonna forget as soon as she gets in. She's not seen her friends for a long time. I'm gonna go straight into hugging, talking, touching, all the things that kids do. Then you get the reception kids, the nursery kids. You're telling me you're going to tell a 4-year-old, that's 2 foot, don't come any closer. And I think head teachers have been saying you can't social distance in schools, definitely not primary schools. Maybe in the upper ages when they're 10, 11, it'd be a bit easier, but not in the lower ages. So how do you do that? How do you do that social distancing? I just don't see it happening. So where I'm kind of like going with this is, if the restrictions are lifted in May or if it's June, there's got to be that time, that effort taken into work out. What does this mean in reality for people going back to life as normal? It's not life as normal. That is over. This is a new era for how we go about living. And I know I, for one, I've been very sceptical. I've said to my boss already, I'm not looking to, if lockdown is lifted, I'm not going to go straight back into the office. It's not happening. Because we're back in the same environment, being squashed and being next to people who may have the virus and who may start to show symptoms. So in my head, I'm thinking maybe September is when I will go back into the office. My boss is fine with that. He's thinking similar things. From my daughter's perspective, she's not looking to take her girls back to school until September. I can't say I blame her. I mean, obviously, we keep saying that kids have the virus, show no symptoms. But so it's not even that. It's like kids mixed with other kids and then the parents, etc. All of that is just thrown in the mix. So it's a lot easier in my mind for that virus to be going around the school and spreading from person to person. So from child to child, to parent to parent, to teacher, and they bring it back in their homes and it just goes crazy again. So I think there's just so many things that haven't been answered about how we really manage and get back our lives if and when lockdown is lifted. What does that look like? And as much as we're all desperate to get out, meet friends and family and go about our normal lives, going to the pub, going to a restaurant, just going to have a takeaway meal, and just being social, whether it's jogging in the park, riding, getting in your car and driving, we can't just take those things for granted because it's all changed now. COVID-19 has had a massive impact, not just on the people who have died, on the people who are still recovering from the disease, and for those who have just having the early symptoms. It's had a massive impact across the board. And this is from country to country. I don't think there's a country which has been immune from COVID-19. So the reality really is what does life after lockdown look like, and how are we as individuals going to be experiencing that life, and then making sure we're keeping ourselves and our families and our friends safe when we are allowed out. And I think that's a question that I think probably politicians are kicking around every single day, and I don't think anybody's got an answer. And I know that we're all desperate to get out, we're all desperate to end this, but I think most people with common sense are thinking, well, what is the reality of this? We can be in lockdown for 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, but eventually it's got to end. So how are we going to manage that? And I think I've probably put it to making it really simplistic in terms of how to do it on a bus, train, tube, at work, etc. How to do it for the kids, and how do you maintain that long term going? I mean, there's only so many police around that can do so much, but with everybody out there, how are we really going to police ourselves in making sure we're keeping that distance? And how do we ensure that we don't have a flare up of COVID-19? I mean, I think there's just so many questions unanswered that to me make it very difficult for lockdown to end anytime soon, without there definitely being the precautions or the measures in place to help keep each and every one of us safe and to prevent a second round of COVID-19 erupting once we all go back to life, at work, at school, wherever it may be. So I think there's some real kind of like questions out there, some thoughts for us as individuals about what we're going to do, what we're thinking. But I think ultimately, one of the key things in there is just really trying to keep positive and keep going. And I know I myself, I think sometimes, you have Sky, you have Netflix, whatever else you've got, and it's like there's only so many movies you can watch and films, and there's only so many things you can do personally, so much amount of exercise. But I think it's all about just hanging on to the fact that this will end at some point. We can go out and go back to socialising, meeting up with friends and families. We just have to think about what that will look like. So if anybody's got other thoughts about this, anything you've been thinking, any ideas that you've had, anything that you're probably dwelling on and thinking, oh, I'm not sure, and just want to talk about, feel free to send me your comments, your views, your ideas. So keep safe, and thank you for watching, and don't forget, keeping it fresh, keeping it real, and definitely keeping it middle-aged over here.